Today I thought it would be fun or interesting to take a look at the psychology, well not really the psychology because I've only done minimal research for this video, but I thought it'd be cool to look at the kind of some of the psychology behind the obsession that some people and maybe we as a society have with fictionalized stories of kidnappings and also the idea of a yandere relationship. So I decided to do a bit of googling and research, and it was actually quite difficult to find things that were very specific to what I was trying to understand. There was an article that I read on Bustle, which I know is not peer-reviewed and it's not scholarly, but this is not a sociology essay, okay? I'm doing this because I wanted to. One of the first reasons that the psychologist stated that we love watching these weird crime videos and find them so interesting, we love being the victim, which is weird. But like when we watch the movies, he says that often people don't place themselves in the position of the kidnapper, but often place themselves in the position of the victim. And this is sort of like a psychological thing where people try and understand what they would do in that situation, how they would feel in that situation, how they would react, whether or not they would fight back, and whether or not they would end up in a bad position. But also there's a bit of psychology behind it where he says that people often do this because they want to try and figure out whether or not, one, they'd be able to survive or escape and what they would do in the situation too, and three, people try and figure out whether or not they deserve to be in that situation, which I found so interesting, that people would watch these sort of fictionalized versions of, hopefully fictionalized versions of a kidnapping story, or read fictionalized versions of kidnapping stories that are often also found in fan fiction. There are lots of fan fictions where they being fan fiction writers use their favorite characters to portray a kidnapping story, which they often also tie into a sort of yandere kind of relationship, which I will be getting into in a different part of the video. But just for general kidnapping that's not fan fictionalized but just fictionalized, yeah, people like to see, not like to see, but kind of think about whether or not they deserve to be in that situation and what they would have done to get to that situation. And I don't know if this is some sort of like psychological doomsday preparation that everyone has in their heads, that they sort of think, what would I do in that situation? Because why would you ever want to be in that situation? And it's not like they do, but it's just something that their brains do. And like, why would you deserve to be in that situation? Is that something that's like a self-esteem issue where people think that they would deserve to be in a situation where they would be a victim to some kind of evil entity? Like, I still don't know the psychology behind that. I still don't know the answer because I've been looking for it, and like all he says is that we like to be in that position. But I really want to, I feel like maybe I should just be someone's therapist, because tell me why you would think that you deserve that kind of treatment. And does that have something to do with your childhood? Is it something to do with the way that you've been treated by other people? Is it something that you think you deserve because you think you're a bad person? Because I know that lots of people think that they're bad people just because that's a thing, a self-esteem thing that happens. But I just thought that was really interesting, that we often place ourselves in the position of the victim. It's like, as a human being, when you watch these fictionalized versions of these stories, you're trying to figure out how another human being, someone who has the same feelings and hopefully empathy and sort of compassion that you do, how could they do these things to other people? And I feel like that also has something to do with the empathetic parts of human beings, which is weird. I sound like Yolanda Hadid when I say that, human beings. I just think that that's such an interesting thing, that like as humans, like even though someone is doing something horrendous and just terrible, we're still trying to find the humanity in that person and trying to like reach out to the humanity in that person. Like, why would you do something like that? Why is that something you felt that you needed to do, that you had the right to do to someone else? So I just think that that's so interesting, that we sort of still look at even though we treat them with such disdain, we still watch these fictionalized versions to try and guilt-free get into the minds of the perpetrator. may be projecting our own feelings of entrapment in our lives onto the victims, and sort of either want to be saved and get that projection of wanting to be saved through the film, or saving oneself. Yeah, there are only two options. Or being let go, I guess, is the third option by the kidnapper. Sometimes I have these realizations where obviously everyone has their own lives, right, in the world. But when you really, really think about it, not just like in the back of your mind think, oh, well, okay, everyone, like, get a life, everyone has a life, you know what I mean? But like, people are genuinely day to day living their own lives with their own experiences, with their own names, their own spirits, their own brains, you know what I mean? And it's so insane, because like, obviously, if you think we live in a simulation, then you don't think any of your neighbors or any of the people around you have any feelings or emotions or their own lives, but we don't, I think. So I just think it's so insane that so many people would be feeling feelings of entrapment in their normal lives. And like, that brings me to the question, like, do people feel like they're trying to fill some kind of void in their lives by watching some dramatic reenactment of the projection of their entrapment in their lives on screen? Do people feel like that drama and that thrill is filling some kind of void that they feel like they're lacking in their own lives, that void of like excitement? And are people who say that they're satisfied with their lives and like happy and excited, do they have the same level of interest in kidnapping films that maybe other people who aren't satisfied don't, who project their feelings of entrapment on the victim? Like, obviously satisfied people could still watch kidnapping films because they want to see if the person escapes or what they would do in the situation, but like, would they have that feeling of projecting their feelings of entrapment and wanting to be saved? And what can people do to stop that? I'm just posing a question, like a sort of philosophical. I don't know what the answer is, but I just like, is that something that human beings do? Like, instead of actually not taking charge of our own dissatisfaction, I guess it's like, do we even know that we're dissatisfied if we're projecting that sort of entrapment onto the screen and not actually taking care of it in our own lives? Is that something that we do without even knowing? That's the end of that kidnapping thing. I just wanted to know why people found it so interesting. So that brings me to the second part of the video, which is basically the psychology behind, I love saying the psychology behind, but like, this is not real like psychology. It's just like the thoughts behind the interest and maybe in some cases obsession behind the theme of Yandere love.
辰巳と言ったな。いい名前だ。
どうも。
褒美をやろう。
ありがとうございます。
今から私のものにしてやろう。
I'm saying Yandere and love in the same sentence so loosely. Like, those things are worlds apart in reality. Yandere and actual healthy love are not the same thing. They're not the same thing. And I don't want anyone to think that I'm saying they're the same thing. I'm just like mentioning in the same vein, because a lot of fiction that I've seen and fan fiction that I've seen that uses people's comfort characters or favorite fictional characters in order to enact this fascination that they have with a Yandere love relationship. So if you don't know what Yandere is, let me read the definition from you straight from Googly. Yandere is a portmanteau of two Japanese words. The first is yanderu, which means to be sick, and the second is dere dere, used here for love struck. A yandere is often sweet, caring, and innocent before switching into someone who displays extreme, often violent or psychotic level of devotion to a love interest. Firstly, almost always including characters that have been self-sacrificing, people feel deserve more, and that people feel have a dark side to them. With Yandere, I think, again, it's sort of a fascination of the horrible, like getting into the mind of a twisted person. I feel like that's such a weird thing, because I don't want to offend people, but at the same time, if you're stealing people because you think that you deserve to be in love with them, that is kind of twisted, right? Like, I don't know, it's an interesting thing because a lot of people say that they don't, obviously writers don't condone a lot of the things that they write about. Like the same way a person can write a novel about kidnapping and a thriller about murder and not condone murder and kidnapping, sort of in the same vein. But I just think it's interesting that these things are explored in any case. What is the psychology that you're trying to get behind writing them, and what is the idea behind romanticizing and fictionalizing these things, especially with your favorite characters as the yandere? And the one reason I think this happens is because there's the idea of being irrevocably chosen. So I think that statement pretty much speaks for itself. The idea of being wanted to the point of obsession and maybe even need, and then being taken for that because there's one person who chooses you all the time, because the yandere can't take you back into society without being arrested, and they don't want anyone else, obviously, otherwise they would have just dated around, but they didn't, they chose you. And so I guess the idea of being irrevocably chosen is something that is interesting to people, and maybe that psychology behind that and wanting that kind of relationship is feeling abandoned. And I just think that's both sad and also very interesting, because what other ways do you get the feeling of not being abandoned besides that? And obviously there are ways, but I just think that's very interesting thought behind it, and that's not backed up by any actual psychology. That's just what I think it is. The other thing is the idea of codependence, and I say this because yanderes often take their victims and break them down and remold them into the person that they want them to be, who is in love with them. And although they've chosen their victim specifically, they may like certain parts of them and not others, and they may like just the look of them. It depends, there's a whole lot of things, I'm not really sure, but like just the idea that they mold them into someone that they need them to be and who needs them creates a codependent relationship that I think that people find fascinating. But I don't know that I don't think it's good that it's romanticized, even though I know that it's not condoned, it is still romanticized, which is an issue in and of itself. And the other side of the codependence could also be that the victim turns the yandere into some weird twisted semblance of normal, and they're the only person that can keep the yandere in check, so that relationship can't really be broken, otherwise that person goes insane, and this victim I don't know what actually happens to the victim in a situation where they break up with someone that they were previously keeping in check. That's interesting. I don't know what happens in that situation, but I know that it is a codependent relationship when someone who has Stockholm Syndrome or has been remodeled now also has some kind of control over the yandere. Is it also the control and power dynamics that are interesting and fascinating? I think so. And that weird power play, who's gonna give first and what is gonna give, because something has to give for these people to be comfortable, and they're in this situation now where one of them is uncomfortable, both of them are actually uncomfortable because one person is not acting the way that they want to be, the other person is to be acting, and one is not being treated the way they want to be treated, so something has to give. And that power play, the power dynamic, and the fact that something has to give, and like what's gonna happen in the story may also be the very interesting dynamics behind what makes a yandere story so interesting. And yeah, again, it's the same kind of thing with kidnapping, just that the kidnapper is in love with the person now. Is the person gonna get out? Are they gonna be in the situation? And as the viewer, do I think I deserve to be in the similar kind of situation, and would I get out, and what would I do, and would I fall in love? And you know what I mean? I just think that's interesting. That's it for this video. That's all I have to say for that. I think that was a really interesting exploration for me to look at and to think about and to kind of try and understand, which I don't know if I understand it any better than I did before when I was half thinking about it. Now that I am fully thinking about it, I think I do. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it was interesting for you as well, and I hope you have a good evening, afternoon, morning, whatever. Bye.